Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1: The Road at Sundown. The road into town lies pale beneath the evening sky. All day, the sun has warmed the dust. Now the earth releases that warmth slowly beneath the turning wheels of a wagon. The wheels make a soft, dry sound as they pass, pressing two narrow tracks into the powder. Behind them, a little dust rises into the honey-colored light. It lingers for a moment and then settles again. The wagon moves without hurry. A patient mule draws it forward, head lowered, while the leather harness shifts gently with every step. There is no need for speed. The day's longest journeys are nearly done, and the town ahead is already preparing for evening. This is California's mother lode, the gold-bearing country along the western foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Low ridges fold one behind another toward the distant mountains. In the nearer country, broad-limbed oaks stand over dry grass, scattered stones, and reddish soil. Their shadows stretch across the road in long, blue-gray bands. It is a warm, dry season, perhaps late spring or early autumn, sometime around 1855. The afternoon has been bright, but the air is cooling now. Beneath the oaks, the change can already be felt. The shade is soft and comfortable, and the faint breeze carries the dry scent of grass and earth. The land beside the road bears signs of many kinds of work. A shallow ditch follows the slope, built to carry water toward the places where miners need it. Farther away, a wooden flume crosses a hollow on narrow supports. It resembles a long, simple trough raised above the ground. Water moving through such channels can be guided toward claims and washing places, though at this hour its sound is faint. Near a stream bed are pale heaps of washed gravel. Beyond them, cuts in the hillside show where soil has been removed and sorted. Picks, shovels, pans, and larger devices have all been used in these foothills. The search for gold has altered the course of water, the shape of banks, and the color of exposed ground. Yet this country did not begin with the search for gold. These foothills are the homeland of the Central Sierra Miwok and neighboring indigenous communities. Their relationships with the rivers, plants, animals, trails, and seasons reach far beyond the crowded years of the gold rush. Families and communities lived, traveled, gathered food, traded, and cared for places here long before newcomers marked claims or raised storefronts. The new roads, camps, and settlements brought deep disruption to those older relationships with the land. Any view of this evening town belongs within that longer history, held by the foothills and remembered in ways that extend far beyond the short life of a mining camp. Ahead, between the oak trunks, the first roofs become visible. At first they seem like little more than straight lines set against the rounded hills. Then the road bends, and the settlement gradually comes into view. There is a row of wooden buildings, several canvas-covered additions, and one newer brick wall, glowing softly in the last sunlight. The town has no famous name in the wider world. It is one of many settlements that appeared along the mother lode, though it resembles places such as Columbia, which grew quickly after gold was found nearby. For this evening walk, it is enough to call the town Alder Creek. Alder Creek began as a cluster of tents near water and workable gravel. Then came rough cabins, board shanties, workshops, eating houses, and stores. Some early structures were made from whatever materials could be found close at hand. Others arrived in pieces. Prefabricated buildings with walls, roof timbers, doors, and even windows prepared elsewhere could be shipped to California and assembled where they were needed. Now, in the middle years of the 1850s, old and new stand side by side. A canvas wall has been stretched beside a wooden shop to make an extra room. A low log building rests close to a taller frame structure with a false front, built upward to make the business appear larger from the street. Newer brick structures have begun to appear among the tents, cabins, and rough wooden walls. The wagon continues toward them, Its driver holds the reins loosely, the mule's ears turned toward the scattered sounds of town. Somewhere, a hammer strikes. A length of chain is drawn across wood. A door closes. Another wagon rolls slowly along a side street. These sounds are separate now, with quiet spaces between them. Earlier, they would have mingled with voices, tools, animals, and the steady labor of the nearby diggings. But the working day is ending. The hammer falls a final few times, each stroke softened by distance, and then it stops. The gold rush that brought so many newcomers here began several years before this evening. On January 24, 1848, James Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill. News traveled outward slowly at first, and then with increasing force. By 1849, migration had accelerated. Over the years that followed, hundreds of thousands of newcomers arrived in California. They came by several long routes. Some crossed the continent in wagons, moving over plains, rivers, deserts, and mountain passes. Others traveled by ship around Cape Horn, at the southern end of South America, on a voyage that could take many months. Still others journeyed by steamship to the Isthmus of Panama, crossed that narrow bridge of land, and boarded another vessel on the Pacific side. The travelers came from many countries and communities. They carried different languages, trades, hopes, and habits. Not all of them became miners, and not all who tried mining continued with it. A growing settlement needed food, clothing, tools, transport, lodging, carpentry, repair work, and many other services. Someone might arrive with a gold pan and eventually find steadier work baking bread, keeping accounts, tending animals, or selling boots. Mining camps often formed beside streams, gravel deposits, trails, and wagon routes. Some lasted only a season. When the easiest gold was gone, their tents came down, their signs were removed, and the paths gradually grew quiet. Other camps developed into towns, gaining workshops, hotels, saloons, stores, stables, assay offices, and postal service. Alder Creek has become one of the settlements that stayed. The road widens as it reaches the first buildings. The dust here is finer, stirred throughout the day by boots, hooves, and wagon wheels. Now it lies nearly undisturbed, pale as flour in the shaded places, and golden wherever the last sunlight still reaches it. A hitching post stands beside the road. One horse waits there, resting on 3 legs, its reins looped securely around the rail. The horse flicks an ear as the wagon passes. Then it becomes still again. Beyond the post hangs a painted sign. Its lettering has faded at the edges beneath sun and weather. A small breeze moves the sign on its iron hooks, though not enough to make it tap against the wall. Next comes a doorway, open to the cooler air. Inside, someone sweeps a floor in slow, even strokes. Dust gathers before the broom and is guided toward the threshold. The person pauses to let the wagon pass, and then resumes the quiet work. Above the roofs, cooking smoke rests in thin blue layers. It rises from stovepipes and brick chimneys, carrying mild scents of wood smoke, bread, beans, and something simmering with onions. The smoke lifts only a little before spreading into the evening air. The remaining sunlight touches each surface differently. It glows through tan canvas, catches the silver heads of nails and rough boards, and turns window glass briefly to amber. A brick wall holds a deeper red. On a shaded porch, barrels and crates lose their sharp outlines as the daylight softens. The wagon turns toward the stable. Its wheels leave the main street, and the measured hoofbeats gradually fade. For a little while, the town seems balanced between day and night. A carpenter carries a short stack of boards indoors. Someone folds an empty grain sack and places it beneath an awning. A bucket is set beside a pump. Farther along, 2 figures walk home from the diggings with tools resting across their shoulders. Their voices are too distant to distinguish. They become part of the low evening murmur. A final trace of sunlight rests on the highest roofs. Below, the street has entered the cool shade. The pale dust no longer glows quite so brightly, and the long oak shadows blend with the shadows of porches and walls. Then the first lamps begin to appear. One shines behind a small pane of glass, no brighter than a golden bead. Another glows in an upstairs room. Across the street, a candle passes behind a window, carried by an unseen hand. Its light travels over the glass and disappears into the room beyond. The clearest glow comes from a broad window a little farther ahead. Shelves can be seen within, lined with jars, folded cloth, tins, boxes, and paper parcels. A few customers remain near the counter while the shopkeeper measures out the final goods of the day. The movements inside are unhurried. A parcel is folded. A jar is returned to its shelf. A hand rests briefly upon an open ledger. Outside, the evening air continues to cool. The last wagon sound fades near the stable, and the cooking smoke thins above the roofs. As shade settles fully over the road, the general store keeps its warm light a little longer, welcoming the final customers before the shutters are drawn. Chapter 2. The General Store. The broad window of the general store gathers the last daylight and holds it beside the warmer glow of two lamps. Their flames burn steadily behind clear glass chimneys. Beyond them, wooden shelves rise almost to the ceiling. From the road, the store appears crowded with useful things. Yet once inside, everything seems to have its place. The door opens with a gentle scrape across the floorboards. A small bell gives one modest note, and then the room settles again. The air is dry, filled with mingled scents. There is flour from an open barrel, coffee from a wooden bin, leather from several pairs of boots, and the clean, plain fragrance of soap. Shelves and crates add the resinous scent of unfinished wood. Somewhere nearby, dried apples lend a faint sweetness that comes and goes as the air moves. Along one wall stand barrels and sacks of flour, rice, beans, sugar, and crackers. A metal scoop rests among the beans, its handle polished by many hands. Smaller containers hold salt, tea, coffee, and dried fruit. Bacon and other preserved foods are carefully wrapped or covered. Tins and bottles occupy the higher shelves, their labels facing outward in tidy rows. The store carries far more than food. Candles lie bundled in paper. Matches are kept safely away from the stove. There are bottles of lamp fuel, bars of soap, coils of rope, and boxes of nails. Buckets hang by their handles from pegs. Gold pans are stacked like shallow, dark plates. Picks, shovels, and axes stand near the back wall, their wooden handles rising in a close, orderly cluster. Cookware hangs nearby, ready for a cabin, camp, or boarding house kitchen. Another section belongs to clothing and sewing goods. Folded blankets form a soft, heavy pile. Flannel shirts rest beside socks. Boots stand in pairs, some stout and plain, others finer and less suited to muddy roads. Hats hang above bolts of cloth. Behind the counter, narrow drawers contain thread, buttons, needles, paper, envelopes, and bottles of ink. A customer asks for a short length of thread. The shopkeeper selects a spool of dark, sturdy cotton. He unwinds what is needed, measures it without haste, and loops it into a small coil. Brown paper is drawn from beneath the counter. The thread is placed in the center, and the paper is folded over at first from one side, then the other, and neatly at each end. A piece of string completes the parcel. It is small enough to rest in the palm of one hand. Another customer waits for tea. The shopkeeper opens a tin, and a mild fragrance rises into the room. He measures a modest amount into paper, folds the packet securely, and places it on the counter. There is no hurried bargaining. The customer nods and reaches into a pocket. Payment in a mining settlement may take several forms. Coin is useful when it is available, but coin is not the only possibility. Some people pay with gold dust or small nuggets. Others use bank drafts, barter, or arrangements based upon credit and trust. The shopkeeper may enter a purchase in the ledger and accept payment later, perhaps after a miner sells gold or a worker receives wages. Gold dust requires particular care. It does not have one fixed automatic value merely because it is gold. Its worth depends upon weight and purity, along with local custom and the confidence shared by buyer and seller. Fine dust may contain sand or other material. A careful scale, an experienced eye, and a dependable reputation all matter. By the middle years of the gold rush, federal gold coins minted in California could also circulate. The San Francisco branch mint opened on April 3, 1854, turning some of the region's gold into standardized coins. Even then, older habits continued. Dust, nuggets, coins, drafts, barter, and credit might all pass across a single counter, each recorded in its own way. Near the center of the store stands a counter scale with two shallow pans. The shopkeeper places a paper bag on one side and a small weight on the other. Then he lowers the scoop into the barrel of beans. The beans shift with a soft, dry sound, They slide over one another and settle into the scoop. He pours them into the waiting bag. The scale rocks gently. One pan descends while the other rises. He removes a few beans, pauses, and watches the narrow beam. It sways once, and then again. At last it becomes level. These small acts of measuring give the store its steady rhythm. Flour is scooped from a barrel. Nails are counted for a simple repair, or weighed when more are needed. Cloth is unrolled across the counter and measured by the yard. Lamp fuel is poured with care. Each purchase is modest, yet together they allow the settlement to continue from one day to the next. Nearly everything in the room has traveled farther than it appears. Some goods began their journey across an ocean. Ships arrived at San Francisco carrying tools, cloth, medicines, preserved foods, tobacco, and occasional luxuries from distant ports. From the bay, freight might continue inland by riverboat toward Sacramento or Stockton. There it could be transferred once more, loaded into wagons or secured to pack animals for the slower journey into the hills. The final miles were often the most difficult. Roads could be steep, dusty, muddy, or deeply rutted. Weather delayed travel. Wagon wheels broke, and animals tired. Crates could be damaged, sacks could split, and bottles might arrive with fewer companions than they had possessed at the start. Every stage added to the cost. So did shortages and sudden demand. A rush of new arrivals might empty shelves that had seemed well supplied only days before. Another season might bring easier transport and fuller stock. Prices therefore changed greatly from one place and date to another. A famously high price remembered from one camp was not necessarily typical throughout gold country. Distance, season, road conditions, damaged shipments, available supplies, and the merchant's own resources all helped determine the cost. The contents of general stores varied for the same reasons. A large settlement near a dependable route might offer medicines, cookware, writing supplies, tobacco, and a few imported luxuries. A smaller or more isolated camp might carry only plain necessities, such as flour, beans, coffee, salt, candles, rope, tools, blankets, and boots. Here the shelves are reasonably full. A blue and white cup sits alone on an upper ledge, finer than the heavy tin cups nearby. A small jar of preserved fruit catches the lamplight. Neither is essential, yet each might remind someone of a settled table in a distant home. Such luxuries arrive only occasionally, tucked among practical crates, and chosen when someone decides that usefulness need not be the only measure of a thing. The last customers make simple purchases. One chooses a candle, another asks for a few nails and a button. A traveler examines a pair of wool socks, considers them, and returns them neatly to the counter. As each person leaves, the bell above the door sounds once and becomes still. The shopkeeper begins to restore the room. The scoop is laid flat inside the bean barrel. Lids are fitted over flour and rice. A bottle is wiped around its neck before being returned to the shelf. Loose string is wound into a ball. Small scraps of paper are gathered from the counter and set aside. Then the ledger is brought forward. It is a broad, heavy book with a worn cover, and pages ruled into narrow columns. Within it are purchases, debts, deliveries, and payments. A sack of flour received by wagon has its line. So does a shovel sold on credit, a bundle of candles paid for in coin, and a packet of tea exchanged for gold dust. The shopkeeper sits on a tall stool and dips a steel pen into ink. For a moment the point rests above the paper. Then he writes one final line in a compact, careful hand. The pen makes a faint scratching sound. He checks the amount, adds a small mark in the proper column, and waits while the ink settles into the page. The bottle is stoppered. The pen is wiped clean. The ledger closes with a soft weight and is carried to a shelf behind the counter. Only one lamp is needed now. The shopkeeper lowers the other flame and watches it shrink. Shadows deepen around the barrels in folded cloth. Boots become dark shapes beneath the shelves. Tins retain narrow edges of gold, while glass bottles hold the last light in small, quiet reflections. At the window, the wooden shutters are drawn inward. One panel covers half the view of the street. The other meets it in the center. A bar is fitted into place. The general store is closed for the evening, its flour, candles, tools, boots, and cloth waiting in orderly silence for another day. Outside, the air feels cooler. From neighboring buildings come the final sounds of work, softened by walls and distance. A blacksmith sets down a tool. A carpenter moves a board. A stable door eases shut. Each sound remains separate for a moment, then fades into the gathering dusk along the street of many trades. Chapter 3. The Street of Many Trades. The street beyond the general store holds the last sounds of the working day. They come one at a time through the cooling air, the scrape of a wooden box, the quiet ring of iron, the whisk of a broom beneath a doorway. In daylight, these sounds mingled with wagon wheels, voices, animals, and footsteps. Now each can be heard clearly before it fades. A mining town may have begun with the search for gold, but it could not continue on miners alone. It needed merchants, cooks, teamsters, clerks, craftspeople, stable workers, laundresses, boarding house keepers, barbers, carpenters, and blacksmiths. Someone had to feed and house the miners, transport goods, mend equipment, and care for the animals carrying so much of the town's weight. Such work could offer steadier earnings than prospecting. Bread, shelter, repairs, clean clothing, and transportation were needed every day. Just down the street, the blacksmith is finishing his work. The forge still glows within the dim shop, though its heat has begun to settle. The bellows hang still, and a faint ribbon of smoke crosses the rafters toward the opening above. On the anvil rests a small piece of wagon hardware, already shaped. The smith studies it, then gives it 3 final measured taps. The first is clear, the second softer, and the third seems to travel along the street before disappearing. The iron's red glow deepens, dulls, and becomes gray, though warmth remains within. Blacksmiths were needed almost everywhere in gold country. Horses and mules required shoes. Wagons needed rims, bolts, brackets, and chains. Picks grew blunt, shovel edges bent, hinges failed, and mining tools cracked under repeated use. With an anvil, forge, hammers, tongs, and skillful hands, a smith kept many other kinds of work moving. He returns each hammer to its place, hangs the tongs on hooks, gathers scraps for reuse, makes the ashes safe, and checks the water bucket. A broom passes over the floor, collecting soot, scale, and dust. Then he steps outside, where evening feels cool after the forge. Next door, the carpenter shop carries the dry, clean scent of fresh-cut wood. Planks are stacked by length. Smaller pieces wait beneath a bench to become pegs, braces, handles, or patches. The carpenter draws a hand plane along a board, and its sharp blade lifts a shaving so thin that it rises like a pale ribbon. One final curl slips free and falls among the others. The carpenter runs a palm over the edge. Smooth enough now, the board may become a shelf, counter door, bunk, wagon part, or the side of a sluice box, a wooden trough through which miners washed gravel in running water. In a town built quickly, carpenters continually fitted, strengthened, and replaced things. They made store counters and shelves, boarding house bunks, wagon parts, sluice boxes, and building frames. Hand saws hang beside chisels and braces, and a square rests on a half-finished frame. Sawdust is swept aside, leaving boards and tools in patient order. Chapter 4. Supper at the Boarding House. The boarding house stands a little back from the road, its front porch raised on short posts above the pale earth. Boots have left a fine border of dust along the steps. Near the door, a wooden peg holds 2 broad-brimmed hats. Another hat rests on the bench beneath it, as though its owner had been too hungry to hang it properly. Warm light reaches through the windows. One pane is clouded with steam from the kitchen. A clear trail remains in the mist where someone has passed a cloth across the glass. Beyond it, quiet shapes move between the stove, the table, and the cupboard. The building offers meals as well as rooms. Some boarding houses provide both. Others serve supper to anyone able to pay, whether or not that person stays the night. In a town growing as quickly as this one, a room may mean a narrow space with several beds, or simply a place on a shared floor. Beds and privacy are not always easy to find. New arrivals can come faster than carpenters can build. Accommodations vary greatly. There are crude shelters with little more than bunks and blankets. There are substantial hotels with parlors, dining rooms, and neatly painted signs. Between them are many modest houses offering whatever comfort their owners can manage. This boarding house falls somewhere in the middle. Its boards are plain but well swept. Its tables do not match, but they stand firmly. Some dishes have small chips along their edges, yet each one has been washed and set out with care. Inside, the kitchen stove gives off a steady warmth. An iron pot rests above the fire. Every so often a ladle touches the rim with a soft, rounded note. Steam rises from the stew in pale ribbons. Potatoes, onions, and pieces of boiled meat have cooked together until their flavors have mingled. Nearby, a pan of beans remains warm. A coffee pot waits at the edge of the stove, close enough to the heat to send up a familiar fragrance without boiling too strongly. Bread rests beneath a folded cloth at the end of the serving table. The cloth keeps in a little warmth and protects the loaves from dust. When it is lifted, the crusts appear brown and gently uneven, shaped by hand. A smaller basket holds biscuits, their tops lightly cracked. Meals in Gold Country depend upon distance, season, weather, and transportation. Flour, rice, coffee, tea, dried beans, and preserved fruit can endure a long journey more easily than tender vegetables. Fresh eggs, butter, meat, and produce may be costly in an isolated camp, especially when wagon roads are poor or winter weather delays supplies. Yet diets are not all alike, and people do not live only on beans, bacon, and coffee. As nearby farms develop and transportation links improve, milk, fruit, vegetables, and other fresh foods become more available. What appears on a boarding house table changes with the seasons, the roads, and the town itself. This evening, there is stew, bread, beans, and a dish of stewed apples preserved from an earlier season. Tea is offered beside the coffee. A small bowl of butter stands near the bread, to be used sparingly. The proprietor has placed a spoon beside it so that each diner may take a little. The communal table gathers people whose days have been quite different. A freight driver sits near one corner, his shoulders relaxed after hours on the road. Beside him is a clerk, with ink still faintly visible along one finger. Two miners have washed at the pump, though kale dust remains in the seams of their sleeves. A carpenter bends over his bowl. Farther down the bench, a merchant listens while a traveler speaks in a low voice. Craftspeople and service workers sit among new arrivals and long-time residents. Some have come from eastern states, others have crossed oceans or traveled north from Mexico and South America. Around tables like this one, many languages may be heard, along with varied accents, customs, and familiar ways of preparing food or taking tea. Not every person understands every word. Still, the common motions of supper need little explanation. A bowl is passed. Bread is offered. Someone moves the salt within reach. Another diner makes room on the bench. The voices blend into an even murmur beneath the gentle clink of spoons against bowls. No conversation rises above the others for long. There are quiet remarks about a wheel repaired before dusk, a parcel expected on the next stage, and rain that may or may not arise before the week is over. Someone unfolds a scrap of news from another town, then saves the longer reading for later. For now, the meal has its own calm order. The proprietor moves between the kitchen and dining room with practiced steps. She has spent much of the afternoon measuring flour, tending the stove, checking the pantry, and arranging places for the evening boarders. In rapidly growing settlements, cooking, keeping rooms, sewing, and doing laundry can provide meaningful incomes. Domestic services are in high demand. Women who operate boarding houses or offer such work may build businesses through long hours, practical skill, and careful management. The labor is substantial. Fuel must be carried and water heated. Food must be purchased before it spoils, stretched without becoming too meager, and served on time. Sheets and towels must be washed where water and soap are not always convenient. Rooms must be swept. Beds must be prepared. Accounts must be kept, even when guests come and go with little notice. This proprietor knows how many meals the flour barrel will provide and how much coffee remains in the tin. She knows which boarder has paid through Saturday and which traveler intends to leave with the morning stage. Nothing in the room is extravagant, but very little is accidental. Even so, no single boarding house can represent all the others. Some are crowded, uncomfortable, or poorly kept. Some offer little beyond shelter and a plate at the table. Others become orderly, respected establishments. Larger hotels may have private rooms, upholstered chairs, and dining rooms with printed menus. Quality varies from one settlement to another, and sometimes from 1 month to the next. Here, on this evening, the room is modest and settled. A second ladleful of stew is offered to those who want it. One diner accepts. Another rests his spoon across his bowl and gives a small shake of the head. The bread passes once more from hand to hand. At the far end of the table, tea is poured into a thick cup. Nearer the stove, coffee darkens a white cup whose handle has been repaired with a narrow band of metal. The little curl of steam above it rises, thins, and disappears. Gradually the serving slows. Spoons come to rest against the bottoms of bowls. The low conversation grows softer, with longer pauses between remarks. A freight driver draws one last piece of bread through the broth left in his dish. The clerk folds his napkin, though it is only a square of plain cloth, and places it beside his cup. Around the room, people sit back for a quiet moment. The warmth of the stove has softened the weariness of the day. Outside, the road is growing dim. Inside, the lamps hold their small circles of amber light. Then the benches begin to ease back. They move carefully over the wooden floor, one at a time, with a gentle scrape. Diners carry their dishes toward a tub near the kitchen, or stack them neatly at the end of the table, according to the custom of the house. Coins are set beside a plate. A boarder pauses to confirm the hour of breakfast. Another thanks the proprietor with a nod before collecting his hat. The room empties by degrees rather than all at once. Soon only 2 guests remain over their tea. Their words are indistinct, softened by the faint settling sounds of the stove and the wash of water in a basin. In the kitchen, bowls are rinsed and placed upside down to drain. The ladle is lifted from the stew pot, washed, and hung from a hook. The proprietor counts the clean plates as they return to the cupboard. One, then another, then another. She sets aside several slices of bread for morning and folds the cloth over them. The coffee pot is moved away from the heat. What remains of the stew will be cooled and considered for another meal, because little can be wasted where every sack and crate has traveled so far. A final spoon is dried. A cup is placed on its shelf. The basin water becomes still. Outside, evening has deepened. Light from the boarding house lies in long rectangles across the porch and touches the dust beyond the steps. A few diners linger there, adjusting their coats or looking along the street before choosing where to go next. Some return directly to their rooms. Others walk toward the hotel desk to ask about mail. A few drift toward the saloon, not in search of a noisy spectacle, but for a newspaper, a quiet card table, a familiar tune played softly, or a few companionable minutes at the close of the day. Behind them, the boarding house door settles gently on its hinges. Through the clouded kitchen window, the last dishes are being dried. The stove continues to offer its steady warmth, while the folded bread waits beneath its cloth for morning. Chapter 5. The Saloon Before Nightfall. A short distance from the boarding house, another doorway stands open to the evening. Amber light rests upon its threshold, making a warm shape in the pale dust of the street. Above the door hangs a painted sign, its lettering faded by summer sun and winter weather. The building beneath it is plain, with a broad wooden front, 2 glass windows, and a roof that slopes gently toward the alley. This saloon is neither a grand hall nor a rough canvas tent. Gold Rush saloons could be either of those things, and almost anything in between. In a new settlement, a proprietor might begin with a plank counter beneath a tent roof. In a wealthier or more established town, there might be mirrors, lamps, glassware, card tables, and occasional music. The room before us is modest but settled, furnished with enough care to suggest that the town expects to remain here for some time. Inside, the floorboards have been swept, though dust still rests in the narrow spaces between them. Several square tables stand along one wall. Some are bare wood, worn smooth by sleeves and hands. One is covered in green cloth, faded at the corners. Behind the counter, shelves hold a mixture of glass tumblers, ceramic cups, and a few metal vessels. What people drank from depended upon what the keeper could afford, what had survived the long journey, and what happened to be available when the establishment was supplied. A lamp hangs near the center of the room. Its flame shines through a glass chimney, giving the walls a mellow amber color. A second lamp rests behind the counter, where its light catches the rim of a cream-colored ceramic cup. The cup itself is ordinary, but in that soft glow, its narrow rim seems almost golden. Only a few people remain. Near the window, a worker rests with both hands around a cup. His coat hangs over the chair behind him. Dust has settled into the seams of his boots, and his shoulders have the easy stillness of someone whose work is finished for the day. He does not appear to be waiting for anything in particular. For a little while, a chair, a warm room, and the sound of familiar voices are enough. At the far end of the counter, A traveler listens while another patron reads from a folded newspaper. The paper has already passed through several hands. Its edges are softened, its folds deeply pressed, and one corner bears the faint mark of a thumb. Newspapers were valuable in towns where news arrived slowly. A single copy might be read aloud, borrowed, and passed from a hotel to a store, then carried into a saloon. Reports from distant places became part of the evening conversation, traveling from one reader to the next. The reader does not hurry. He follows each narrow column with one finger, pausing where the print is small or the paper is creased. There are notices of arrivals and departures, goods offered for sale, elections, road conditions, and events in cities many days away. There are prices for flour and tools, advertisements for medicines, and announcements from people seeking workers, partners, or missing parcels. The traveler leans a little nearer. He does this not because the room is loud, but because he wants to catch every word. In a place such as this, a person might learn whether a trail was passable, whether a wagon had arrived with supplies, or whether work could be found at a claim, a mill, a stable, or a shop. A saloon could serve as an information center, as well as a place for refreshment. Business arrangements were sometimes discussed across its tables. Travelers exchanged news, residents listened to rumors, and considered whether they might be true. Some patrons played cards or heard music. Others came only to sit among familiar voices at the end of a long day. Not everyone drank, and not everyone approved of saloons. Temperance organizations existed in mining towns as they did in many 19th century communities. Their members encouraged people to avoid alcohol and argued that a settlement would be steadier without strong drink. Even inside a saloon, a customer might choose something else, or come only for a newspaper, a conversation, or a place near the stove in colder weather. At the table covered in faded green cloth, two card players are nearing the end of an unhurried game. Their cards are plain and softened by use. Each one is laid down with a small, dry sound. A few counters rest between the players, though the amount at stake appears modest. Gambling could be found in many saloons, but it did not define every establishment or every evening. Some offered games and entertainment. Others were little more than simple counters with a few stools. One player studies the cards before him. After a quiet pause, he sets down the last card and gathers the small pile with the side of his hand. His companion gives a single nod. There is no celebration and no disappointment worth carrying into the street. Together they straighten the deck and leave it at the center of the table. Near the back wall stands a piano. It is not new. The dark wooden case bears scratches from its long journey, and one brass wheel beneath it has been braced with a folded piece of leather. A piano was possible in a prosperous establishment, though it was certainly not standard in every saloon. Such an instrument had to be purchased, transported over difficult roads, and protected as well as circumstances allowed. Its presence says something about the prosperity of this particular room, but nothing about saloons as a whole. A person seated beside it lifts the cover over the keys and presses one note. The tone is soft and slightly worn. It lingers for a moment beneath the low conversation, then gradually disappears. The person tries no melody. Perhaps he was only wondering whether the instrument remained in tune. He lowers the cover again, gently enclosing the keys, and returns to his chair. Behind the counter, the barkeeper rinses several glasses in a basin. Water circles the glass, and lamplight trembles across its surface. He inspects each vessel, wipes the rim with a clean cloth, and turns it upside down to dry. A ceramic cup follows, and then a metal mug. His motions are practiced, orderly, and quiet. Beside the basin sits a small set of scales. In some gold country businesses, customers could pay with gold dust. A merchant or barkeeper might weigh it carefully, though less formal exchanges were sometimes measured by a pinch. Such a method was imprecise. One person's pinch could differ from another's, and the exchange might easily become unfair. Accurate scales and agreed values offered more certainty. When available, were simpler still. Tonight no gold dust is being measured. The scale rests motionless, its two small pans hanging evenly. The reader reaches the end of a column and folds the newspaper along its existing crease. He passes it to the worker beside the window, who accepts it with a quiet word of thanks. Paper whispers against paper as another page is opened. Outside, the color of the street has changed. The last pale gold of daylight is leaving the upper fronts of the buildings. Window glass now reflects the lamps within, rather than the sky beyond. People passing on the road have become darker shapes moving through the gentle blue-gray evening. Inside the saloon, conversation lowers with the light. There is more space between one sentence and the next. The two card players put on their coats. Their chairs scrape lightly across the floorboards. The door opens, admitting a breath of cool evening air. For a few seconds, amber light reaches farther into the street. Then the players step outside, and the door settles closed behind them. The room seems larger after their departure. The piano remains silent. The green table is empty except for the straightened deck. The worker turns another page of the newspaper. Behind the counter, one more glass is rinsed, inspected, and placed upside down beside the others. The traveler remains near the counter, listening as the reader mentions arrivals and departures listed in the paper. A coach is expected. An express shipment has been delayed. Several sacks of mail may already have reached a nearby office, though no one is certain whether everything has been sorted. At the word mail, the worker near the window looks up. He lowers the newspaper and folds it carefully, smoothing the paper with the palm of his hand. Somewhere along the street, beneath another lantern, letters are waiting in pigeonholes or stacked behind a hotel desk. Some have crossed ocean and continent. Others have come from towns only a few days away. Each bears a name written by a familiar hand. The worker rises slowly and takes his coat from the back of the chair. He slips one arm into a sleeve, then the other. The folded newspaper is placed on the counter, ready for the next reader. The barkeeper turns another clean glass upside down. Behind him, the shelves glow softly, and the little balance scale remains level and still. The traveler stays to hear the last few lines of the notice. The reader's voice has become quieter now. Beyond the windows, the road is nearly dark, while the lamps inside appear warmer against the deepening blue. Then the door opens once more. The worker steps across the amber threshold and into the evening. The mention of letters seems to travel with him. It leads away from the fading murmur of the saloon, past dim windows and quiet wooden fronts, and toward the express office or hotel desk, where a lantern burns above the counter and the evening mail waits beneath its patient light. Chapter 6. Letters, News, and Distant Homes. The lantern above the express office door has been lit early, while a narrow ribbon of evening still rests over the western hills. Its flame shines through clear panes of glass, touching the wooden threshold and the pale dust beyond it. Compared with the saloon down the street, the office is a quiet place. No piano sounds here, no cards pass from hand to hand. There is only the soft movement of paper, the turning of a ledger page, and the low voice of a clerk reading names. Inside, 2 canvas mail sacks rest behind the counter. They have been tied at the neck with cord, and their surfaces bear the marks of travel. There is gray dust along the seams, a faint stain left by rain, and lettering painted in black, now softened by use. One sack has already been opened. Its contents lie in several orderly piles beneath the lantern. The clerk lifts each envelope and turns it toward the light. Some addresses are written in careful, narrow script. Others are broad and hurried, as though the writer feared missing a departing ship. A few envelopes carry wax seals, chipped a little at the edges. Many letters have no separate envelope at all. The paper itself has been folded inward, and then folded again, making its own small packet. An address has been written on the outer face. A spot of wax or sealing paste has held the sheet closed through its long passage. Along the wall are shallow wooden compartments, each just deep enough to hold a little stack of mail. The clerk sorts the letters by surname, by mining camp, or by whatever clue the address provides. In a country where people move often, the work requires patience. He holds one letter close to the lamp. Worcester, he says quietly, sounding out the name of the distant town beneath the sender's line. The word seems to bring with it the soft impression of another place. Perhaps there are brick buildings there, shaded roads, and fields beyond the last houses. Perhaps the evening air is cooler than it is here. The clerk does not pause for long. He places the letter in a compartment and reaches for the next. In the earliest years of the California gold rush, most civilian mail between the eastern United States and California traveled by sea. Beginning in 1849, contract mail could journey by steamship to Panama, cross the narrow Isthmus of Panama, and continue aboard another ship up the Pacific coast. When every connection went smoothly, The journey could take roughly 2 months. Often, it took longer. Ships waited, weather changed, mail sacks missed one connection, and remained behind for the next. Even after a letter reached San Francisco, it still had to travel inland toward the foothills and the mining settlements. The first United States Post Office in California opened in San Francisco in March of 1849. Sacramento's followed later that same year. Yet, the mining districts spread far beyond those growing towns, along river valleys, over foothill roads, and into settlements that sometimes appeared almost as quickly as signs could be painted for them. Private expressmen helped bridge the remaining distance. They carried letters from established offices into mining country, sometimes charging high fees for the service. Express companies also transported parcels, payments, gold, and other valuables. A miner might entrust a company with a small amount of gold to be sent to family elsewhere, turning the result of many days of labor into support that could travel home. Nothing about the exchange is immediate. There is no transcontinental telegraph carrying messages in an instant, and no pony express crossing the plains. Both belong to the year 1860 and after. Here in the middle years of the 1850s, news still moves at the pace of steamships, wagons, pack animals, and human hands. The worker who left the saloon now stands at the counter. He gives his name, and the clerk looks through several compartments. For a little while, there is only the whisper of envelopes sliding against one another. At last, the clerk draws out a folded sheet. The worker recognizes the handwriting before the name is spoken. His expression changes only slightly, but his shoulders settle. He takes the letter with both hands, as though receiving something delicate. The paper is thin and softened by travel. It has been folded many times, and the creases have grown pale. One corner is rounded from rubbing against other letters in a crowded sack. The ink has faded from black to brown. Near the end of the counter stands a lamp with a wide metal base. The worker moves toward it and opens the letter carefully. A quiet crack in the sealing wax releases the final fold. He smooths the page beside the lamp, keeping one hand over the lower edge so that the paper will not curl inward again. His eyes move slowly across the lines. The letter may tell him that apple trees flowered well that spring. It may mention a new roof on a barn, a neighbor's visit, or a younger relative learning to write. Ordinary details can travel farther than their writers imagine. A sentence about rain, a repaired gate, or preserves put away upon a shelf may cross the sea in the isthmus before reaching a wooden office in the California hills. Such details allow a distant home to become briefly near. The reader can almost hear the remembered voice behind the ink. Every letter has its own pace. Some lines are close together, written to make the most of a precious sheet. Others leave broad spaces between thoughts. A word has been crossed out here, another has been added above the line. Near the bottom, the writing grows smaller, as though the sender found one more thing that had to be said before the page was folded and sealed. The worker reads without hurry. Not every person in town receives a letter. Mail often accumulates because the intended recipients have moved on. A person known to be working one creek in autumn may have gone to another camp by winter. Someone may have left the mines for Sacramento, San Francisco, or a farm in one of the valleys. Addresses are sometimes no more precise than a name, a district, and the word California. The clerk keeps unclaimed letters as long as he reasonably can. He asks travelers whether they know the people named upon them. From time to time, a list may be posted or printed, yet some letters continue to wait in their compartments, preserving news for readers who may never know that it arrived. Others receive mail with surprising regularity. Their families write whenever an opportunity comes, numbering pages or noting the dates of earlier letters. Even then, replies may cross out of order. A question can arrive after its answer has already been sent. Two people may describe the same month from opposite sides of a continent, each unaware of what the other has just written. For some, the intervals between letters are only a few months. A reply may not come at all. Still, when a familiar hand appears upon a folded sheet, the long wait seems, for a little while, to grow lighter. Homesickness is common. Familiar voices have been reduced to lines of ink, and familiar rooms have become memories carried from place to place. Yet not everyone in California wishes to return east. Some people have opened shops, planted gardens, married, or brought relatives west to join them. Some came from lands farther away than the eastern states. They are making lives that cannot be described simply as a pause before going home. Home in a changing town may come to mean more than one place. At the hotel desk beside the express counter, a regional newspaper lies open. Several people gather near it without crowding. One reader holds the page where the lantern light is strongest and reads a short item aloud. It concerns a road being improved between two settlements. Next comes a notice of goods newly arrived in Stockton, followed by a report copied from a San Francisco paper. The news has traveled in stages, passed from one printed sheet to another. By the time it reaches this room, it is no longer new in the strictest sense. Yet it still connects the town with ports, cities, farms, elections, markets, and events beyond the foothills. The listeners receive it quietly. One asks whether the roadwork will shorten the wagon journey. Another nods at the mention of flour prices. No one speaks for long. The reader finishes the final line, folds the newspaper along its old creases, and leaves it on the desk for whoever may wish to read it next. The clerk returns to the mail sacks. A small parcel is wrapped in brown paper and bound with string. Beside it lies a packet sealed with dark wax. He checks both against entries in his book, forming each letter of the recipient's names with care. His ledger contains fees, dates, places, and brief descriptions. One envelope, one parcel, one payment, one sealed packet. The nib of his pen moves softly over the page. He pauses to dip it in ink, waits for one dark drop to settle, and continues. When the entry is finished, he rests the pen beside the inkwell. Outside, footsteps become less frequent. The street has taken on the blue-gray color that comes after sunset and before full darkness. Through the office window, other lanterns can be seen in the general store, the hotel, and the assay office farther along the row. The worker finishes his letter and reads the last lines once again. Then he folds the sheet upon the same softened creases. He does not hurry. He slips it into an inside pocket, close beneath his coat, and thanks the clerk in a low voice before stepping outside. Another customer claims a newspaper. A third asks whether mail has arrived from Sacramento. The clerk searches, answers quietly, and returns the remaining letters to their places. Then the room grows still again. The lantern flame gives a small, steady movement behind its glass. Shadows from the wooden compartments lie across the wall. The open ledger waits upon the counter, while the canvas sacks sink gently into their own folds. The clerk closes one sack and pushes it beneath the counter. Unclaimed envelopes remain in the shallow compartments, resting upright in patient rows. Their addresses face outward, each name waiting for a familiar eye. Somewhere beyond the office, the worker walks slowly toward his lodging, with the letter safe inside his coat. The words it carries have crossed a great distance, and now they travel only a little farther, along a quiet street beneath the evening lamps. Back at the counter, only the sealed packet remains upon the desk. It is small enough to fit in one hand, but heavier than folded paper ought to be. The clerk checks the inscription once more, then he carries it to the far end of the counter, ready for delivery to the assay office. There, beneath another steady lamp, a different kind of careful reading continues. Words and addresses give way to weights, measures, and metal. A delicate balance waits in the quiet room, ready to tell what the sealed packet contains. Chapter 7. The Assayer's Scales. The sealed packet passes from the post clerk's hand into the keeping of the assayer, who receives it beneath a steady lamp. The assay office is a narrow room with a front counter, 2 wooden stools, and shelves fitted closely against the walls. It is warmer toward the back, where dark crucibles stand cooling upon a brick surface. These small, heat-resistant vessels have held samples in the furnace. Their sides are marked by use, and they rest in an orderly row, each beside a handwritten label. No customers are waiting tonight. The day's questions have already been asked. A miner has left a piece of quartz for examination. A merchant has brought a little pouch of gold dust. Someone else has delivered several flattened flakes wrapped in paper. Now the office belongs to the quiet work of weighing, waiting, observing, and recording. The assayer places the sealed packet on the counter. An assayer is a trained person who tests a sample to learn how much valuable metal it contains. The test itself is called an assay. This work matters because gold is not always as simple as it appears. A bright yellow piece may contain silver, copper, or other metals. Native gold, meaning gold found naturally in the earth, often includes such materials. Its color and weight may suggest something about its quality, but appearance alone cannot provide a reliable answer. Even weighing tells only part of the story. A scale can show quantity, it can tell how heavy a sample is, but weight by itself does not establish purity. Two packets may weigh the same while containing different amounts of gold. One may hold cleaner flakes, the other may include grains of sand, traces of another metal, or tiny fragments of stone. So the assayer weighs, weights, observes, and records. He breaks the packet seal carefully and unfolds the paper. Inside rests a small quantity of gold dust, no more than a modest spoonful. Gold dust is the common name for fine particles or flakes of gold separated from sediment. Some pieces are almost too small to distinguish from the pale paper. Others catch the lamplight and return a muted gleam. The word dust can make the material sound uniform, but it rarely is. One packet may contain delicate flakes washed from sediment. Another may include coarse grains, dark sand, or minute pieces of gravel. Gold dust has no single automatic value. Its worth depends upon purity, weight, local practice, and the trust shared by the people handling it. Beside the lamp stands a balance enclosed within a wooden case with glass panels. The case protects its delicate mechanism from drafts and from the fine dust that finds its way into every building along the road. Even a faint current of air can trouble a sensitive scale. The assayer opens a velvet-lined box. Inside, tiny brass weights rest in fitted hollows, arranged from larger to smaller. Each has its proper place. He lifts one with a small pair of forceps and sets it upon the scale pan. Then he adds another. The beam rises. He removes the second weight and chooses a finer one. The pointer trembles near its mark. He waits. Its movement becomes smaller, passing gently from one side to the other. Each swing is shorter than the last. At length, the pointer comes to rest. The assayer writes the result in a ledger. Across the room, other samples wait in folded paper packets. Each packet bears a name, a date, or a mark connecting it to a line in the assayer's book. One contains flakes. Another holds a rough nugget, a naturally occurring piece of native gold. A nugget may appear solid and impressive, yet it too may contain quartz or other material. Its uneven shape tells something of its passage through earth, rock, and water, but it does not reveal its exact purity. On a lower shelf lies a sample of ore. Ore is rock containing enough valuable mineral to be worth examining or processing. It may show a visible streak of metal, or it may look much like ordinary stone. When ore is tested, a representative sample must first be selected. This means choosing a portion that fairly reflects the larger amount. If needed, the sample is crushed, mixed, and reduced before a small, precise quantity is weighed. The selection requires patience. A rich fragment chosen from otherwise poor rock could give a misleading result. A barren fragment taken from better material could do the same. The assayer's task is not to select the brightest piece. It is to learn as accurately as possible what the larger body of ore may contain. After weighing comes testing. In a proper assay, a selected sample may be heated with substances called fluxes. These help separate precious metal from unwanted material. One long-established method is known as fire assay. It uses high heat and lead to collect gold and silver from a sample. A later high-temperature step is called cupellation. During cupellation, the lead is oxidized and removed, leaving behind a very small bead of precious metal. This is specialized work, carried out with suitable equipment, training, and care. Here, its complexity is contained within the assayer's practiced routine. There are labeled samples, measured portions, dark crucibles, cooling brick, and neat columns of figures. What began as rock or dust may end as a tiny bead, small enough to rest beneath the tip of a pencil. That bead is weighed again. Weighing, weighting, observing, recording. By comparing what remains with the original sample, the assayer can determine how much valuable metal the sample contained. The result may guide a sale, settle an account, or help someone decide whether a body of ore is worth further work. The lamp flame shifts gently within its chimney. Its light travels across the counter and catches one grain of gold left upon the fold of the opened paper. For a moment, the grain shines more clearly than all the larger objects in the room. The assayer notices it and taps the paper lightly, returning the grain to the packet. Gold passes through many forms in a town such as this. There is dust in pouches, nuggets wrapped in cloth, and ore packed in sacks. There is also bullion, which is precious metal in bulk form, often shaped as a bar or ingot rather than a coin. Coin is different again. It is metal struck to an official weight and value, carrying a recognized stamp. During the early years of the California gold rush, standard coin could be scarce. Before the San Francisco Mint opened in 1854, much of California's gold had to travel east before it could be made into official federal coinage. Private mints and assay businesses helped address the shortage of standard coin. They offered weighing, testing, and other services at a time when local confidence and reputation mattered greatly. On April 3, 1854, the San Francisco branch mint opened. It could accept deposits of gold and convert that gold into federal coinage. Even after the mint began its work, assay offices remained useful. Miners, merchants, and companies still needed samples examined or evaluated, and uncertain material measured by someone whose skill they trusted. Trust in this room is built slowly. It rests in labels that remain with their samples. It rests in clean pans, accurate weights, careful records, and results that can be explained. It rests in the repeated habit of attending to small things. The balance cannot promise fortune. It cannot say what tomorrow will bring, or whether another patch of ground will reward the labor spent upon it. It can answer only the narrower question placed before it. How much is here, and after careful testing, how much of it is precious metal? The assayer finishes the entry for the sealed packet. He reads the line once, then checks it again. The figures remain as he recorded them. He folds the contents into fresh paper and writes the identifying marks on the outside. The packet joins the others in a shallow drawer, separate from the brass weights and the day's receipts. Each folded parcel rests beside its label. Each result rests beside its name. At the back of the room, the assayer checks the cooling crucibles. Their warmth has softened. The bricks beneath them still hold a little heat, releasing it quietly into the office. Nothing glows. Nothing needs to be hurried. The vessels may remain where they are until morning. He returns to the balance. One by one, he lifts the tiny brass weights from the pan and settles them into their fitted hollows in the velvet-lined box. The larger weight goes first, then the smaller one, then the finest weight of all. Each finds its place. The lid closes over them. The assayer brushes a few pale specks from the counter, careful not to disturb the folded packets. He checks the ledger entry once more. Then he closes the book, and its pages settle together with a soft, papery sound. At last he lowers the wooden and glass cover around the balance. Protected from dust and moving air, the beam hangs level. The pointer rests at its center, no longer trembling, as though the instrument too has completed its work for the evening. The room seems quieter now. The dark crucibles cool upon their bricks. The labeled samples wait in their drawer. The velvet-lined box holds its graduated weights. The closed ledger keeps the day's measurements in straight and orderly lines. The lamp is turned down, though not yet extinguished. Its circle of light draws inward across the counter. Corners that were amber a moment ago become softly brown. Glass panels reflect a smaller flame. Finally, the assayer slides the packet drawer shut and turns its little key. The lock answers with a quiet click. Outside, the remaining daylight has nearly withdrawn from the street. Yet the town's work has not ended all at once. It continues in smaller motions, near kitchens, sheds, stables, and doorways. A bucket is carried from a water barrel. Split wood is placed in a careful stack. A horse lowers its head toward fresh hay. Farther along the row, someone draws a broom slowly across a threshold. Behind us, the balance remains covered and still, its pointer resting at the center. Ahead, the ordinary tasks of evening continue. Water is carried, wood is gathered, animals are tended, dust is swept from worn boards before the deeper night arrives. Leaving the assayer's measured room and its steady scales behind, we return to the open air and follow these quiet labors along the darkening street. Chapter 8. Water, Wood, and Everyday Labor. Outside the assayer's office, the last pale color of evening rests above the rooftops. The street has grown quieter, though small tasks continue wherever a door stands open or a narrow yard lies between two buildings. These are not the labors that fill newspapers or draw travelers across great distances. They are the ordinary duties that keep a town supplied, orderly, and prepared. Near the corner of a store, a wooden water barrel stands beneath a simple shelter. A man lowers an empty bucket beside it. Then he dips a smaller vessel into the stored water and begins to pour. The stream is clear in the dim light. It makes a hollow, steady sound against the wooden sides of the bucket. When the bucket is nearly full, he sets the smaller vessel aside. A little water has escaped onto the ground, darkening the pale dust. In that small damp patch, the evening sky appears as a faint reflection, no larger than a handkerchief. The image trembles when another drop falls, then it becomes smooth again. Water is needed everywhere in town. It fills kettles and coffee pots. It is used to wash dishes, floors, clothes, tools, and tired hands. Horses and mules drink from troughs. Gardens, where the ground permits them, require careful watering. Buckets must also be kept ready in case a spark lands where it should not. Beyond the town, at the diggings, miners use far greater quantities of water. It loosens soil, washes gravel, and helps separate heavier gold from lighter sand and stone. The same water that fills a kitchen crock or an animal trough may also be directed toward the workings outside town. Yet many mining districts are dry for much of the year. A dependable stream may lie far from the places where water is wanted. Wells and springs serve some settlements. Elsewhere, water must be hauled in barrels. Engineers and laborers construct ditches, wooden pipes, and aqueducts to carry it across uneven country. A flume is one of the most visible parts of such a system. It is a raised wooden channel that carries water over slopes, ravines, or ground too rough for an ordinary ditch. Supported on timber frames, a flume may cross the landscape like a long, narrow shelf. The water within it moves according to the gentle pull of gravity, descending along a carefully measured grade. In the early 1850s, Colombia began receiving water through an engineered network of flumes, pipes, and ditches. Such systems made daily life easier, and they also supplied mining operations. But water was never simply a matter of building a channel and letting it flow. People disputed who could divert it, how much they could use, and what they should pay. Water rights and water prices became major local questions, especially when the season was dry and every barrel seemed more valuable. He carries it with both hands so that little spills over the rim. His steps are slow and even. At a kitchen doorway, he places it beside a second bucket, both within easy reach. Farther along the street, split firewood is being arranged against a wall. Each piece is laid with its cut end facing outward. The stack rises in tidy rows, broad at the base and level across the top. Pine resin gives the evening air a faint, clean scent. Wood feeds the cook stoves that prepare supper and the stoves that warm rooms in colder weather. It fuels blacksmithing and some larger industrial work. Timber is also shaped into walls, roofs, floors, fences, flumes, mine supports, and furniture. A growing settlement may seem to be made almost entirely of wood, from the plank beneath a boot to the beam above a doorway. This dependence has a cost beyond the street. Trees are felled not only for fuel, but also for construction and mining. Hillsides that once held mature timber can be changed in a short time. The stack beside the wall speaks of useful preparation. It also reminds us that every board and split log has come from the surrounding country. Firewood must be stored with care. Closely spaced buildings of wood and canvas are vulnerable to flame, particularly in dry weather. Lamps and candles burn indoors. Stovepipes pass through walls and roofs. Fuel is stored nearby. An ember overlooked at the end of the day can travel farther than anyone expects. Colombia suffered major fires in 1854 and again in 1857. Like other established towns, it learned to organize fire companies, store water, build cisterns, and rebuild some important structures in brick. Yet much of fire prevention remains quiet and domestic. A cook trims a lamp wick so that it will burn evenly. A shopkeeper checks a stove damper, the metal plate that controls the flow of air. Shutters are closed where they are needed. Ashes are kept in a safe container. Water buckets wait near doors, full and undisturbed. These are small precautions, repeated night after night. A hand pauses near a stove to feel whether the heat is settling. A lid is placed firmly over a container. A candle is moved away from cloth and paper. Each simple act helps the town pass safely from the working day into darkness. At the stable, a worker crosses the yard with a bundle of hay held against his chest. Loose stems bend over his arms and brush the front of his shirt. Inside, leather harness hangs from wooden pegs. A lantern has not yet been lit. For a little while longer, the remaining daylight is enough. The stable hand divides the hay between two stalls. One horse turns its head toward him, then lowers its muzzle into the manger. The other shifts once upon the straw before becoming still. He checks the water trough, runs his palm along a gate latch, and moves a bucket away from the path, where no one will stumble over it. Across the way, a broom moves over the boards of a storefront. Its strokes are broad and unhurried. Dust, wood shavings, scraps of paper, and a few dry leaves gather in a narrow line. In a rapidly growing settlement, drainage and sanitation are not always adequate. Streets can become muddy in rain and dusty in summer. Waste and dirty water require careful disposal, while clean water must be protected. Swept yards, clear passages, and sensible handling of refuse are simple measures, but important ones. The broom reaches the edge of the porch. The gathered dust is lifted carefully rather than scattered back into the road. Then the shopkeeper turns the broom around and rests it beside the door. At the far edge of town, an old oak spreads its branches above the darkening ground. It stood here before the road was pressed into the earth. It stood before the storefronts, flumes, claims, and assay offices. Its presence invites a longer understanding of this place. The surrounding country is the homeland of the Central Sierra Miwok. Indigenous communities lived near dependable water and oak groves, drawing upon sophisticated seasonal knowledge of plants, animals, and waterways. Their lives and histories did not begin with the gold rush, nor did they end with it. The sudden arrival of miners and settlers brought disease, violence, displacement, coercive labor, discriminatory policies, and loss of access to traditional lands and resources. Mining diverted streams, stripped soil, cut timber, and deposited sediment and debris into waterways. These changes were not abstract. They affected living communities. Native people did not vanish. Indigenous people and their descendants remain living parts of California. Their families, cultures, knowledge, and presence continue. For a moment, the evening walk pauses beneath the oak. Its leaves move only slightly. The trunk is dark against the remaining light, and the earth beneath its canopy holds the quiet depth of a place known across many generations. Beyond the town, waterways follow older courses wherever they have not been redirected. Hills and valleys hold a history far longer than any ledger. This new settlement, so certain of its busy purpose, occupies only a brief span within an ancient and continually inhabited landscape. The pause is allowed to remain. Then, gently and without haste, the evening chores continue. A woman pours clean water from a pitcher into a covered crock. At the rear of the boarding house, someone carries a basin away for careful emptying. The stable hand gathers one final armful of hay. A cook slides the wood box closer to the stove, then checks that no split piece rests against hot iron. Along the street, another bucket is filled and placed beneath a porch roof. Its handle settles against the rim with a soft wooden tap. Nearby, someone straightens a small stack of kindling. The narrow pieces are kept dry for morning, when the cook stove must be awakened again. The separate movements begin to diminish. The broom is still. The hay has been carried inside. The trough is full enough for the night. Firewood stands in square, dependable rows, its rough edges catching the last gray light. The stable gate is latched. A yard is cleared. A covered vessel of clean water waits on a shelf. Near one doorway, 2 full buckets remain ready in case they are needed. Nothing about these preparations is grand, yet together they make the evening more orderly and secure. Now the town turns slowly from daylight to lamplight. A small flame appears behind the general store window, steady and gold. Another begins to glow inside the boarding house. Near the stable, a lantern is set beside the door. Its glass surrounds the wick and protects the flame from the evening air. One by one, more lights form along the street. They shine in windows and open doorways. Each creates a separate pool of warmth upon the boards and pale dust. Near the water barrel, the little damp patch catches one wavering point of gold. The reflection lengthens, trembles, and grows still. Around it, the street becomes darker. The bucket has been set down. The wood has been stacked. Animals bend quietly over fresh hay. Storefronts stand swept and orderly. The town's remaining work draws inward, away from the road and into kitchens, rooms, and sheltered doorways, and along the darkening street, the lanterns continue to appear, one after another, quietly marking the way. Chapter 9. Lanterns along the street. The first lantern near the stable burns with a modest, steady flame. Its glass sides are faintly clouded from many evenings of use, and one narrow pane holds a wavering reflection of the street. The light does not travel far. It rests upon the iron latch, the worn boards beside the door, and a small half-circle of packed earth. Beyond that gentle circle, the stable yard settles into blue-gray shadow. Across the way, the general store window has become a square of amber. Shelves that appeared plain in daylight now seem deeper in the gathering dusk. Tins, bottles, paper parcels, and folded cloth wait in orderly rows behind the glass. The shopkeeper moves near the counter with a candle in a simple metal holder. Its flame leans as he walks, then straightens when he stops. He uses it to inspect the latch on a cabinet before carrying it toward the rear of the store, where the warm point of light slowly grows smaller. Candles remain useful throughout the town. They are easy to carry, simple to place wherever a little light is needed, and inexpensive compared with some kinds of lamp fuel. Some are made from tallow, the rendered fat of animals. Others are made from beeswax, which generally burns more cleanly but costs more. A candle may stand in a brass holder, a punched tin lantern, the neck of a bottle, or a plain wooden candlestick, shaped by a local carpenter. Its purpose is ordinary and familiar. It illuminates a page, a stair, a cupboard, or the final few stitches in a piece of cloth. It gives just enough light for one small task at a time. Even so, a candle flame must be watched. A long wick can smoke, and melted wax or tallow may run down the side. Before leaving a room, careful hands pinch or snuff the flame. In a settlement built largely of timber, canvas, and dry boards, open fire is treated with respect. Lamps are kept away from curtains and crowded shelves. Lanterns protect their flames behind glass, horn, or metal. Water buckets wait beneath porches, not as decoration but as part of the town's quiet evening caution. Farther along the street, the boarding house windows brighten. The kitchen carries the strongest glow because work continues there after supper. A lamp stands upon the table while dishes are washed, dried, and returned to their shelves. Its reservoir holds oil, and a flat woven wick draws the fuel upward. At the top of the wick, the fuel feeds a small, controlled flame. The cook turns a little wheel by a fraction. The wick lowers, and the flame becomes shorter and clearer. Above it, a glass chimney guides the flow of air. The chimney helps the lamp burn steadily, though soot gathers upon it and must be wiped away. In the morning, someone will polish the glass with a cloth or a twist of old paper. For now, its curved surface carries a second flame, upside down and faintly distorted, drifting across the room whenever someone passes. The fuel in such a lamp depends upon place, date, price, and availability. Whale oil was used in many 19th century lamps, though it could be costly, especially far inland. Other lamps burned vegetable oils, lard oil, or prepared fluids. Kerosene became increasingly common after the development of commercial petroleum refining in the 1850s. In a gold country settlement that changes from year to year, an older oil lamp may stand beside a newer kerosene model. Each has traveled over a long road. Each is cleaned, filled, and kept in service for as long as it remains useful. No single kind of light belongs to every building. A prosperous hotel may have several glass lamps set before polished reflectors. A small cabin may rely upon one candle. A merchant may burn a brighter lamp above an account book, while a stable hand carries a sturdy lantern in a metal frame. The town at night is not evenly illuminated. Instead, it becomes a chain of separate glows. Each belongs to a room, a doorway, or a person moving carefully through the dusk. Outside the boarding house, a guest steps onto the porch with a lantern. The metal handle rests against his fingers. Within the glass, the flame bends gently as he descends the steps. It casts a long shadow from each porch post and catches the pale edges of wagon tracks in the road. When he passes the damp patch near the water barrel, the lantern appears once beneath him, reflected in the shallow water. Then the image divides into trembling pieces beneath the touch of his boot. The water settles behind him, and the reflection joins itself again. He continues toward the hotel at an unhurried pace. Along the opposite walk, the barber closes his shutters. A candle burns behind him, making the painted lettering on the window glow briefly before the first shutter covers it. Then the second shutter meets the first, and the narrow seam of light between them disappears. At the assay office, a lamp illuminates the empty balance scale. Its two pans hang level and still, no longer measuring dust or small filings. The assayer lowers the wick, and the room softens from bright gold to quiet bronze. The delicate scale remains visible for another moment, balanced in the fading light. The saloon keeps more lamps than most buildings. Their glow falls upon tables, a newspaper folded beside an untouched glass, and the dark varnished edge of the counter. One lamp hangs from a ceiling hook, raised high enough to spread its light across the room. Another stands near the piano, where the closed lid reflects a slender yellow line. Voices continue inside, though they have grown lower. Cards are gathered into a neat stack. A man finishes reading a column of old news and folds the paper along its familiar creases. The bright windows shine like polished copper, concealing much of the room from anyone outside. From the street, only a few silhouettes move slowly across the warm glass. Above the shops, smaller lights appear in rooms reached by narrow stairs. A seamstress places a candle near her wash basin. A clerk turns down a lamp beside a plain iron bedstead. At the hotel, someone carries a candle along the corridor, pausing at each door while the brass numbers catch and release the glow. The light moves across the wall, passes beneath a doorway, and disappears into a room. With every lamp that is lit, the darkness between the buildings seems a little deeper. Roof lines fade against the evening sky. The road loses its pale daytime color and becomes a broad, muted ribbon. Hitching rails, barrels, and stacked crates remain visible, only where lamplight touches their upper edges. Beside the stable, a wagon wheel holds a thin crescent of gold along its rim. There are no streetlights in the modern sense. No continuous line of bright fixtures reaches from one end of the settlement to the other. Anyone walking after dark carries a lantern or follows the light spilling from windows and open doorways. Familiar landmarks guide the way. There's the awning of the general store, the large cottonwood near the creek, the broad hotel porch, and the stable sign moving almost imperceptibly above the road. The signs themselves are beginning to disappear. Painted words that could be read from a distance at noon have become dark rectangles. Yet the town remains gently legible through its scattered lights. The boarding house kitchen offers a broad glow. The assay office shows one narrow flame. The saloon windows are brighter, though increasingly still. The stable lantern rests low beside the door. Each light suggests something of the work continuing behind it. A dish is dried, a page is read, a bootlace is loosened, a latch is tested. Then one by one, those small tasks come to an end. A breeze moves down from the higher ground. It lifts a little dust, but it cannot reach the flames protected behind glass. The stable lantern flickers once as air enters through its vents. The porch lamps remain calm. In an open doorway, a candle is shielded by a cupped hand until the door closes. The last natural light lingers above the western hills in a narrow band of silver. For a little while, the sky and the lantern share the town between them. The sky outlines roofs, chimneys, and the high branches of the cottonwood. The lanterns reveal handles, thresholds, faces, and hands. Then the silver band fades. The lamps take over the small duties of seeing. They do not attempt to turn night into day. They illuminate only what is needed. A ledger being closed, a stair being climbed, a pitcher being placed upon a table, a horse being checked once more before the stable door is latched. Near the hotel, the guest with the lantern reaches the porch. He lifts the light slightly to find the first step. The flame rises with him, passes between the porch posts, and enters the building. For a moment, the doorway is filled with warm light. Then the door swings inward and gently closes. The reflection in the damp street is gone, though other reflections remain. A lamp in the saloon window lays a narrow amber ribbon across the glass. A boarding house candle shines upon the polished edge of a dish. The lantern near the stable glimmers faintly against a metal buckle hanging beside the door. The town has grown quieter without becoming entirely silent. A plate touches a shelf. A chair moves softly across a floor. Somewhere, a lamp chimney is lifted, wiped, and carefully replaced. The street receives these sounds and allows them to fade. More shutters close. The bright windows become narrow lines, and then dark wooden squares. In rooms above the shops, candles move away from windows and toward bedsides. Their glow no longer reaches the street, though it remains within, small and useful. Along the road, the remaining lanterns shine in separate pools of gold. Between them lie calm stretches of shadow. A person crossing from one building to another passes briefly into the light, then returns to the softness beyond it. The stable lantern continues to burn beside the door. The boarding house lamp remains steady over the final dishes. A low glow rests behind the hotel desk. Farther away, the assay office has gone dark, leaving its level scales to wait in stillness until morning. Above the roofs, the first stars have appeared, clear and distant over the darkening hills. Their light is older and quieter than any lamp in town. Below them, each lantern attends to its little circle, revealing no more than is necessary: a threshold, a railing, a folded page, a hand upon a latch. And so the evening settles more deeply around the wooden buildings. The lanterns remain for a while, patient and warm, marking the street one gentle light at a time.